The cold wind brushed against Jake's face as he pedaled his bike down the quiet suburban street. It was late afternoon, and the golden glow of the setting sun stretched long shadows across the pavement. He had taken this route 100 times before, heading home from school. The same cracked sidewalks, the same neatly trimmed lawns. But today, something was different. Up ahead, near the corner where the old maple tree stood, a man was standing alone. He looked lost, his grey hair ruffled by the wind, his thin jacket barely enough to keep him warm. His hands trembled slightly as he turned in slow circles, his eyes darting around like he was searching for something he couldn't find. Jake slowed his bike, a strange feeling creeping into his chest. He wasn't the kind of kid to get involved in other people's business. At 14, he had his own worries, homework, basketball practice, and the usual ups and downs of being a teenager. But something about the man made him stop. There was a helplessness in his eyes, the kind you see in a child who's wandered too far from their parents. Sir?" Jake called out hesitantly, stepping off his bike. The man turned toward him, his face full of confusion. I need to get home," the man mumbled, his voice shaky, almost distant. "But I don't know where home is." Jake's stomach tightened. The way the man spoke, the lost look in his eyes. It was like he wasn't completely here. He had heard about dementia before. His friend's grandmother had it, and sometimes she forgot who people were, even her own family. Could that be what was happening now? "Do you live around here?" Jake asked gently, keeping his voice calm. The man furrowed his brow, then shook his head. "I think so, but I don't remember." His voice cracked with frustration. "I was just going for a walk, and now I don't know where I am." Jake glanced around. The street was empty, just the distant hum of a passing car and the rustling of leaves in the wind. He couldn't just leave the man here. What if no one else stopped? What if he wandered into traffic or got hurt? "Okay," Jake said, forcing himself to sound confident, even though his heart was pounding. "I can help." The man's eyes softened, as if Jake's words were the first bit of solid ground he had felt beneath him in a while. "Do you have a phone or anything?" Jake asked. The man hesitated, then patted his pockets, his fingers fumbling. He pulled out an old flip phone, the screen cracked, the battery blinking red. He stared at it like he wasn't sure what to do with it. "Do you remember your address?" Jake tried again. The man opened his mouth, then closed it, his face tightening in frustration. I don't know." Jake bit his lip, thinking fast. He could call the police, but what if that scared the man? He needed a way to help without making him panic. "Maybe someone's looking for you," Jake said. "Do you live with family?" The man's expression flickered, like a small light had turned on in the fog of his mind. "Yes, my daughter." He nodded slowly. "My daughter, Emily." "Okay, that's great. Do you know her phone number?" The man hesitated again, then shook his head. I should know it," he muttered. "Why can't I remember?" His voice cracked, and for the first time, Jake saw something more than confusion in his eyes. Fear. Jake felt a lump in his throat. He couldn't imagine what it must feel like to be standing in the middle of a familiar place and not knowing where home was. "Hey, it's okay," Jake said quickly. "We'll figure it out." He pulled out his own phone and opened a neighborhood group app his mom was always using. Maybe someone had posted about a missing person. He scrolled through quickly, his fingers moving fast, and then he saw it. A post, just 10 minutes old. "Please help. My father has dementia," and wandered off. He was last seen near Maple Street. He's wearing a grey jacket and dark jeans. His name is Robert. If anyone sees him, please call. Jake's heart leapt. "Is your name Robert?" he asked, looking up at the man. Robert blinked. Yes, that sounds right." Jake exhaled, relief washing over him. "I think I found your family." He tapped the phone screen, calling the number from the post. It rang once, twice. Then a frantic voice answered. "Hello, do you have any information about my dad?" "Yes, I think he's with me," Jake said quickly. "He's okay. We're on Maple Street near the old tree." "Oh my God," the woman breathed, her voice shaky with relief. "Please stay with him. I'm coming right now." Jake turned back to Robert. "Your daughter's on her way." Robert's shoulders sagged, as if a weight had been lifted from him. He looked at Jake, studying him for a long moment. "Thank you," he said softly. Jake smiled. "No problem." Minutes later, a car came speeding down the street, tires crunching against the pavement. A woman jumped out before it even came to a full stop. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with worry. "Dad!" she called, rushing toward them. Robert turned, and for a moment, he looked uncertain, but then something clicked. His face softened, and he took a slow step forward. "Emily?" "Yes, Dad, it's me," the woman said, tears brimming in her eyes. She reached for his hands, holding them tightly. "I was so scared." Jake watched as the tension melted from Robert's body, as if the presence of his daughter had finally brought him back to himself. Emily turned to Jake, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you. I don't even know how to—" She stopped, shaking her head, like words weren't enough. "You have no idea how much this means to us." Jake just shrugged, suddenly feeling awkward. "I'm just glad he's okay." Emily smiled. "We want to do something for you. Please, let us." Jake blinked in surprise. "Oh, you don't have to." But Emily just shook her head. "No, really. You helped us more than you know." And what happened next? Well, Jake never could have expected it. Jake didn't think much of it at first. He had done what anyone would have done, helped a lost man find his way home. But something about the way Emily looked at him, the relief in her eyes, stuck with him. It wasn't just gratitude. It was something deeper, something heavier, like she had been carrying a fear so big it was hard to put into words. As Emily helped her father into the car, she turned back to Jake. "Really, I mean it," she said. "Can I get your phone number? I want to do something for you." Jake hesitated, but there was something about her tone that made it hard to refuse. He gave her his number, feeling a little awkward, and watched as she and Robert drove off. That night, as Jake sat at the dinner table, the moment still played in his mind. His mom noticed his distraction. "Everything okay?" she asked. He hesitated before answering. "Yeah, just something happened today." He told her about Robert, about how lost he looked, how scared. His mom's face softened. "That was a really kind thing you did, Jake," he shrugged. I don't know. It made me think, what if no one had stopped?" His mom reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Not everyone would have, but you did." The next day, Jake says that phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Hi, Jake. It's Emily. Are you free this weekend? My family and I would love to meet you properly." Jake stared at the message for a moment. He hadn't expected to hear from her again. A part of him wondered what she meant by "meet you properly." Was this just a thank you dinner or something more? That Saturday he found out. Emily lived in a quiet neighborhood, a little farther out of town. When Jake arrived, her husband and 2 kids were already outside, playing in the yard. The moment Emily saw him, she rushed over, smiling warmly. "Jake, you actually came." He nodded, feeling a little out of place. Yeah, of course. She led him inside, where the smell of home-cooked food filled the air. Robert sat on the couch, his hands resting on his lap, his eyes distant again. But when he saw Jake, a flicker of recognition crossed his face. You, Robert murmured, his forehead creasing. You helped me. Jake nodded. Yeah, how are you doing? Robert blinked, as if he was searching for the right words. I'm here. Emily sighed, sitting down beside her father. Some days are better than others, she admitted. That day, it was one of the worst. Jake listened quietly as Emily told him more about Robert's condition. How it had started with small things, misplacing keys, forgetting conversations. At first, they had brushed it off as normal aging. But then, one day, Robert had driven to the grocery store and forgotten how to get home. That's when they knew it was something more. Jake swallowed. That must be scary. Emily nodded. It is, for all of us, but mostly for him. She turned to her father, gently taking his hand. He was always the strongest person I knew, the one who fixed everything. Now I have to be the one to keep him safe. Robert looked down at their joined hands, then up at Jake. She worries. Too much, he said suddenly. I don't want to be a burden. Emily's face fell. Dad, you're not a burden. Jake watched the exchange, something heavy settling in his chest. He had never thought about it like this. What it must feel like to know your own mind was slipping. To see your family treating you like glass. Emily cleared her throat, changing the subject. Anyway, we wanted to do something for you, Jake, to say thank you. Before he could protest, she reached into a bag beside her and pulled out a small box. This belonged to my dad when he was your age, she said, handing it to him. Jake hesitated before opening it. Inside was a beautifully crafted pocket watch, the metal worn with age, but still polished. It felt heavy in his hands, like it carried more than just time, like it carried stories. It was my grandfather's before. It was my dad's, Emily explained. He always said it was a reminder that time is precious. Jake looked up, unsure what to say. I can't take this. Robert leaned forward, his eyes clearer than before. Yes, you can, because what you did for me that day. You gave me time. Jake swallowed hard. He hadn't expected this. He had just wanted to help. But now, sitting in this living room, he realized that his small act of kindness had meant more than he ever could have imagined. That night, as he lay in bed, Jake kept the watch on his nightstand. Staring at it, the dim light, he thought about Robert, about Emily, about how fragile life could be, and he knew this wasn't something he would ever forget. The next morning brought an unexpected urgency. Jake awoke to the sound of his phone, buzzing relentlessly. It was Emily, her voice trembling, as she explained that her father, Robert, had wandered off again during the early hours, lost in the fog of his dementia. This time, however, things felt even more serious. The family rushed him to the hospital, and Jake's heart pounded with worry. The memory of the pocket watch on his nightstand, a symbol of time and hope, reminded him of the fragile balance between loss and recovery that every moment held. At the hospital, the tension was thick. Emily sat beside her father, her eyes filled with tears as she whispered reassuring words that Jake could barely hear. The doctors quickly assessed Robert's condition, though his memory lapses had always been part of the daily struggle. This episode was more intense than before. After a series of tests and careful monitoring, the doctors confirmed that while Robert's condition was serious, it was not immediately life-threatening. They explained that these moments of deep confusion could be a part of dementia's unpredictable nature, and they urged the family to stay vigilant. In that sterile room, filled with the soft beeping of machines and the steady hum of conversation. The stakes were clear. Every second mattered. Outside the hospital, Jake paced slowly, replaying the events of the previous day. His mind wandered back to the first time he had met Robert, the lost man with dementia, who had needed help on the quiet suburban street. That memory, both heart-wrenching and uplifting, now took on a new dimension. He thought of the gift, the pocket watch, Emily had given him, and how it had already become more than a mere token of gratitude. It symbolized a connection between generations, a reminder that time, though fleeting, could be filled with meaning when kindness bridged the gap between strangers. Back in the hospital room, the tension began to ease as Robert slowly regained a semblance of clarity. Emily's voice, gentle and steady, recounted memories of happier days, stories of Robert's strength and love. In one quiet moment, as the morning light filtered through the window, Robert's eyes met Jake's. There was recognition there, a spark of gratitude and an unspoken apology for the pain his condition had caused. In that instance, the chaos of the last few hours seemed to settle into something tender and real. It was as if the precious seconds captured in the old pocket watch had given them all a chance to pause and understand that even in the midst of uncertainty, hope could be found. Later that day, as the family gathered around a small table in the hospital cafeteria, Emily shared how the frightening episode had been a wake-up call. They realized that while Robert's condition might continue to challenge them, it also brought out the best in everyone around him. The memory of that fateful day, the day when a boy helped a lost man with dementia find his way home, grew even more profound in light of the near-tragic event. It wasn't just about helping someone in need. It was about understanding the true value of time and connection, and how every act of kindness could change lives. For Jake, the events of the past 2 days had transformed his understanding of responsibility and compassion. He saw the intricate web of relationships that held the family together, and he realized that sometimes even the smallest gesture could create ripples that lasted a lifetime. The pocket watch, now resting safely in his hand, had become a cherished reminder that every moment was precious. It was a symbol of the bond between him and the family, a token of gratitude that also carried a quiet promise that no matter how dark the moments might seem, there would always be light in the form of human connection. As evening fell and the hospital's corridors grew quiet, Robert's condition stabilized. The doctors assured the family that while the challenges of dementia were far from over, there was strength in unity and understanding. Emily, with tears still glistening on her cheeks, squeezed her father's hand. "We'll keep fighting this, one moment at a time," she said softly. And Jake, standing by the window, watched as the city lights flickered on, each one a small beacon of hope in the night. In that final reflective moment, Jake understood the deeper truth behind the day's events. It wasn't merely about a lost man finding his way home, or a family repaying a kindness with a precious gift. It was about the enduring power of empathy and the realization that every act of caring, no matter how small, could change the course of someone's life. The lessons he learned from Robert, from Emily, and from that turbulent day would stay with him forever. It was a reminder that while time might slip away in the blink of an eye, the moments that truly matter are the ones filled with love, courage, and a willingness to help others, even when the outcome is uncertain. As Jake prepared to leave the hospital, he took one last look at the pocket watch. Its steady ticking was more than just the passage of seconds. It was a promise that time, when filled with purpose and care, could become a bridge between hearts. And though he knew that life would continue to bring challenges, he felt ready to face them inspired by the strength and resilience of the family he had come to know. In that gentle final moment of the day, the story found its natural end, a conclusion that was as heartfelt and human as the journey itself, leaving a lasting impression of hope, gratitude, and the undeniable power of kindness.